All right, let's dive into something truly wild. We are about to follow an unbelievable chain reaction, a series of historical dominoes that stretches across more than 1,000 years, connecting a single ancient battle in the Middle East to the creation of modern America. It all kicks off with this one single question that, honestly, sounds kind of impossible. How could a battle from way back in the year 680, fought with swords and horses, somehow, through a direct line of events, lead to the United States of America becoming the world's only superpower? I know, it sounds completely nuts, but here's the thing. Every single link in this chain is a real, recorded historical event, and we're going to connect them all one by one.
So where does this whole thing start? Well, not with a big victory, but with a terrible tragedy. A massacre, actually, that planted a seed of anger so deep that it would eventually tear an empire apart and send its last survivors fleeing across the known world.
Okay, so check this out. It all starts in 680 with the Battle of Karbala. This event creates this deep, simmering resentment against the ruling family, the Umayyads. Fast forward 70 years to 750. A rival group, the Abbasids, harnesses all that old anger and starts a revolution. They win, they take over, and they unleash this absolutely brutal purge. The very few Umayyads who survive literally have to run for their lives. They end up all the way over in Spain, where they build this incredible new empire called Al-Andalus, and it lasts for 800 years. But then, in 1492, the whole thing comes crashing down. And that ending, well, it's actually a brand new beginning.
Now, this moment, the fall of Muslim Spain in 1492, it didn't just happen in a bubble. No, it sent this massive shockwave rippling across all of Europe, and it plunged the entire continent into a huge, desperate economic crisis.
And you've got to understand who the big player on the world stage was back then. It wasn't anyone in Europe. It was the massive Ottoman Empire. And when they saw their fellow Muslims kicked out of Spain, they hit back hard. They shut down the Silk Road, they closed all the land routes, and they basically built a wall between Europe and the economic powerhouse of the world at the time, Asia.
And look, this wasn't just a minor headache for Europe. This was an absolute disaster. The entire European economy relied on spices from India, not just for flavor, but for medicine, and, most importantly, to keep food from spoiling in a world with no refrigerators. With the land routes gone, their only option was this terrifying, long sea journey. The economy tanked, and everyone was desperate for another way.
So Europe is in a total panic, and into this chaos walks a guy with a pretty radical, super high-risk idea. He's not some noble explorer setting out for glory. He's basically a businessman trying to solve a massive shipping problem. His name? Christopher Columbus.
And this is where it gets just wild. In the exact same year that the Spanish monarchs finally conquered the last piece of Al-Andalus, they took all that new money and power and used it to fund Columbus's crazy gamble, to sail west to get to the east. He thought he'd done it. He was so wrong.
Now, the funny thing is, Columbus went to his grave thinking he'd found India. It was actually another guy, an explorer named Amerigo Vespucci, who figured out, hey, wait a minute, this is a whole new world, which of course is why we call it America and not Colombia. As soon as that secret got out, it was a mad dash. Spain, Britain, France, Portugal, they all raced to grab a piece of the pie. And right then, for the first time in 1,000 years, the center of global power began its slow, unstoppable tilt from the east to the west.
So you've got this new world, and it's overflowing with resources. But to build a new economy out of nothing, you need people, a lot of people. And the solution they chose, it's one of the darkest chapters in human history.
3.1 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many African people the British alone forcibly kidnapped, packed onto ships, and brought across the Atlantic in the most brutal conditions imaginable to build their new colonies.
But they didn't just stop there. They needed to make sure this system was permanent. So they created this absolutely horrific new kind of law, making slavery generational. It meant that the children of slaves would automatically be born slaves, creating a permanent and free labor force that would go on to build the entire economic foundation of America. Okay, so with this economic engine in place, America goes through three massive rapid-fire transformations. First, the American Revolution. Now, Britain probably could have crushed the rebellion, but they were totally distracted fighting a much more important war over in India. That gave the colonists the opening they needed.
Then comes the Civil War. It was fought to end slavery, but it had this huge side effect. It massively ramped up America's weapons and manufacturing industries. And after the war, all that industrial power fueled this incredible age of invention: the telephone, electricity, the airplane. America became a real industrial giant.
But even with all that, America wasn't the global superpower. Not yet. For that to happen, the old powers, well, they basically had to tear themselves apart. And in World War I, that's exactly what they did. While Europe was bleeding itself into bankruptcy, America mostly stayed out of the fight, selling weapons to everybody. The result was pretty stark, as you can see here. Europe was economically ruined, and the U.S. economy absolutely exploded.
So, we're heading into the 20th century, and it's going to be dominated by two massive global wars. And for the United States, these wars weren't just about winning. They were the final rungs on the ladder to becoming the top dog, period.
So World War II rolls around, and you see the same pattern. For the first few years, America stays out and profits by selling weapons to the Allies. But then, the real turning point comes from a secret letter from Albert Einstein. He warns President Roosevelt that Germany is trying to build an atomic bomb. So America starts a race to build one first, and after Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, forcing the U.S. into the war, that race ends in 1945 when America drops 2 atomic bombs, ending the war and showing the world a level of power that was just unthinkable.
When the dust settles from World War II, there's really only one other country left standing that could even come close to America's power: the Soviet Union. And what comes next is the Cold War, basically a 40-year global stare-down between these two giants. It wasn't a shooting war, but a rivalry fought on every other front: an arms race, the space race, and a battle between two totally opposite ways of life: capitalism versus communism.
In the end, it really came down to economics. The Soviet Union's rigid, state-controlled system just couldn't keep up with the innovation and dynamism of the West, and by 1991, it all just collapsed. The game was over. The world started the 20th century with a bunch of superpowers, but it ended it with only one.
So there you have it. From that one battle in Karbala all the way back in 680 to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1991, it is one long, crazy, unbroken chain of cause and effect. It just goes to show you the history is never really in the past, is it? It makes you wonder, what domino is falling right now, somewhere in the world, that's setting the stage for the next 1,000 years?